To take two. But welcome to the Franchise Show. We are now definitely live. um, we are a little late. Apologies for that. There has been some issues with LinkedIn today, but they're all sorted out now, and we're wonderfully live. And thank you for everyone that is already here. Yes, so I'd like to start by explaining what the Franchise Show is all about. And it is a show designed to create a space for conversation and debate about all matters in the franchising world, to be as inclusive and diverse as possible, to include the audience in exactly the same way as anybody on the screen. We like the show to be driven by people's comments, because as much as there is a theme to each show, where the conversation goes is really up to everybody there listening. So your comments are always going to be appreciated, and they always drive the show. We take a different topic each week, and this week the topic is leadership mistakes, and hopefully how to avoid those mistakes. And I think it's a really good topic. I think any growth, any leader makes mistakes. I think that they're really important actually to make, because you can't learn without getting some stuff wrong. So as much as some people might think mistakes is a negative thing, I absolutely don't think it is, because they're little nudges to keep you on the right path. And I'm very honored to have somebody with me today to discuss these matters, who is a real expert on people first leadership. And that was some words that resonated with me, I think, by putting people first in leadership. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Sonita Reese. I've known Sonita for a while now, and it's an absolute pleasure to have her here on the show. So Sonita, perhaps if you could introduce yourself a little bit further, and your initial take on leadership.
Yes, please do. Thanks so much for having me, Harvey. As those of you on the show know, Harvey is so generous with his information, with his relationships, and just with himself, which is why we connected on LinkedIn originally. So I'm super excited to be here. As Harvey mentioned, my name is Sonita Reese, otherwise known as the Chief Encouragement Officer at First by Five, where I help people first leaders breathe life into their leadership by reviving their dreams, recharging their teams, and helping them reveal more personal margin and profit margin. So I got into this by way of the corporate world and left after dealing with pretty severe burnout. That was a wake-up call when I fell asleep while driving with one of my young sons in the back seat. That just led me to make some big changes in my personal life and in where I would spend my time in a career, and having always just seen the opportunities for leadership, and also just having a heart for visionary leaders, those of you who are building things, whether it be franchises or other businesses. It led me to start this business. So Harvey said, what's my take on leadership? Well, here's the thing. I would ask you all, what do you think leadership is? I'm curious if you can pop some comments in the chat. I'd love to see them.
Yeah, that's great. And thank you for sharing your story. I think it's really important to understand why someone gets to a point where that they've got to. And that was a really powerful story. So thank you for sharing that. I think before we begin, I'd just like to recognize a few people that are here with us today. After our slightly shaky start, I can relax now and say hello to some people. So, Mara is from Italy. She's been a guest on the show, and she's going to be a second-time guest next year. So great to have you with us today, Mara. We've got Simon. Simon is a regular contributor to the show. He's a franchise recruiter. He helps get people into franchises, and he's a lovely chap, and great to have you here as well. We've got somebody new. I'm glad they're looking forward to the show. It'd be great to know who you are, but I'm glad you're looking forward to the show anyway. We've got Tim here today again. Tim is going to be on the show in the coming weeks, so really looking forward to having Tim on the show. I'm really looking forward to, as Sonita said, hear everyone's thoughts on leadership and what it means to them as well. We've got Omar now. Omar is a lovely chap, and I've been on his quiz show, and it's great fun. So great to have you here, Omar. I'm really interested to hear about your thoughts on leadership as well. Kelly, my great friend Kelly is here, and she's put, ta-da, it's working. Kelly has a show called The Awesome Journey, and it's after this one, so she's as nervous as I was about the situation. But great to have you here, Kelly, and thanks for being here. We've got Shaisia here. Really good to have you with us. And look, we've got Raquel. It's lovely. I know that Sonita knows Raquel as well, and it's great to have you here. Thank you so much. I know you're so busy, and thank you for supporting us here as well. So it's great to have you. Just see if we want to make sure that we're catched up on all of these before we continue. Well, Simon says that the Prime Minister has joined, so that's excellent. Nice to see you, Prime Minister. I hope you enjoy the show as well. Look at that, reaching new heights with the Prime Minister.
Love to hear his take on leadership.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So, yes, Rishi, if you're here, great to hear your thoughts on leadership. Well, look, this is a great comment, and I think this is a good place to start, actually. So Mara has said here, ability to listen, at least part of it. I think that is probably the biggest key to not only success in leadership, but success in any part of business, is to be able to listen. What do you think about that, Sonita?
Oh, very, very much so. And are you hearing or are you listening, right? I am not sure how each of you has experienced things, but usually we know the difference. We can hear something, but to really listen means to not only hear the words, but understand what's behind what's being said. And then a leader will then go take that and do something with it, do something that solves a problem or inspires somebody, or at least acknowledges and takes it as input and as evidence for future decisions. Leaders recognize that what's communicated to them as they listen is truly currency. And that's something I'm looking forward to talking more about is communication. So that's great.
Yeah, no, I really agree with you. And I think when you said about listening and hearing and the difference between the two, someone once said to me that you should listen with intent. And I like that as well. To really listen and, like you say, to do something with what you're listening to is really important. Just quickly before we move on, just recognize a few more people that are here, because, as I say, the LinkedIn Live really is about the audience and recognizing and involving people there. Well, that's very kind of you to say, and really glad that you're enjoying the show, Sashia. Let's have a look who else we've got. So we've got Don. It's great to see Don here. Don has his show beforehand, and he's taught me a lot, and he's a good friend of mine, and really nice to have you here. Don had his own businesses for many years, 37 years, a great leader, and really interesting to hear your thoughts on leadership, Don. We've got here LinkedIn user, leadership, guidance, inspiration, and trust. Well, absolutely. Really couldn't agree with that more. My take on leadership is it's about nurturing people, and understanding people's passion. And I think it's a bit like teachers when they're teaching children. It's not about teaching a subject. It's about understanding what somebody's passionate about. When you employ someone, it's not about who they are, what set of skills they've got. It's who they could become. And I think when you understand who somebody wants to become, you understand what their dream is. You then understand how you can nurture it, how you can guide them, how you can inspire them. And that final one that somebody's put there, maybe that is Rishi Sunak. We'll refer to that person as Prime Minister for now. But the final point of this comment here, I think, is trust. And I think that that's really, really important. I think any relationship is a trust journey. Going back to franchising here for a moment, the franchisee franchisor relationship is a journey of trust. When you are talking to a potential franchisee, you want to know what their dream is, what their aspirations are, so that you can be aligned, so that you both kind of are wanting the same things. I think that's a great comment. What do you think about that, Sonita?
So I wanted to touch on two elements of that, guidance and trust. So guidance, yes, key, but in order to be able to guide, you have to have a destination. So one of a leader's primary responsibilities is to have a place they're going so that people decide if they want to go there with them and they have some place to follow. So there's a famous saying, right, that if you have nobody following you, then you're just going for a walk. I would add to that and say, if you have no destination, then you're wandering around in circles. So guidance is key, yes, at the individual level, but one of the mistakes that leaders can make is not having a clear vision. And if they do, not communicating it. Because to your point, Harvey, what are people's hopes and dreams? If they think you're going somewhere in your franchise or with your business that you're not intending to go, that's not good for anybody. So I wanted to hit on guidance, and then trust is so key. That word just gets thrown about, but I don't know that we fully recognize just how critical it is. There have been studies done that show that mistrust can double the cost of doing business. So imagine a merger, for example, that might cost $1 million. If the parties don't trust one another, that can easily become $2 million because of delays, needing to bring in additional legal expertise and the like. And so that's why I wanted to just highlight the trust as a characteristic. And the last comment I'll make on that is one of the most helpful ways to think about trust I've ever found comes from Stephen M.R. Covey. And he wrote The Speed of Trust. And
and the E-Myth. Wasn't it the E-Myth he wrote as well?
Oh, that's Michael Gerber.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a great one. That's a really critical one too, I think. But here's what I think, something that I hope people will find very practically helpful is that essentially trust is a function of character and competence. So character, can I believe your word? Can I believe in your integrity? Can I trust that if something's difficult, you're not going to shy away from it, but you're going to engage in conflict and confrontation to go through the difficult issue? So character, and then competence. Do you have the skills and the ability to do what you're going to say you're going to do? He in his book, The Speed of Trust, it's really unpacked in a lot more detail with different dimensions. But I love that because when you think, how am I establishing trust with people? How is my character and how is my competence? Can they trust that I say I'm going to do what I'm going to do? And have I shown that I can actually do what I say I'm going to do? So how does that land for you in your experience?
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I mean, I've been writing that down. I take so much value from these conversations myself. And, I think I have read that book. And I think that was a fantastic point that you made. I think the other thing, the other point you made early on in that conversation was about if you've got a vision, you need to communicate it. And I think that's particularly relevant if you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to franchise out your business, right? So you've got your business to what you believe is perfection. And then you want to try and scale that. You want to replicate that. Well, you're not going to replicate perfection, first of all. But let's say you get it 80% there. That 80% has to be your foundation of your vision, really, truly what you want to convey. So that communication part, I think, was really, really important. Just before we continue, we've got a lot of comments here, so I wanted to get to a few of these. Simon has said here, lead by example and let people flourish. Absolutely. I think if you can show people that you can do it, but more importantly in that statement, let people flourish, let them shine, let them let whatever they want to be, and encourage that. I think it's really, really important. I just wanted to recognize the fact that we've got Dr. Constance here. I truly don't know how she finds the time to do all of the things that she does. Fantastic to have you here, Constance. And actually, here's a comment to get into. So, being able to delegate and being a great leader is not about you; it's about your people. Leading with a heart is the way to go. More transformational than transactional. Yes, yeah. Absolutely. I really couldn't agree with that more. I quite like to touch on leading with your heart. That's an interesting point. I know you've got to have a plan, you've got to have a goal, but what's your take on how much you go with your heart or go with your gut in leadership?
I don't think it's an either and. As a leader, we have responsibilities to deliver, right? Because that's why we're in our position to go to our destination, to achieve a goal, and to do what we say we're going to do. So that's being accountable, and that's another key characteristic of leadership. Are we accountable to those goals and targets? And I know there's a comment coming up that addresses that soon, Harvey, that I'm looking forward to addressing from Tim. But in addition to that, when it talks about leading with your heart, we've seen the research, and we know from experience too, that emotional intelligence, or EQ, is really the major difference with great leaders. It doesn't mean you have to like everybody. It doesn't mean you have to be soft on people not performing. That's not what it means. But it means being able to understand the human component and the dynamics that really get people to do things, not for the sake of having them do your bidding, but for the sake of unlocking their potential and achieving your goals. So I would say maybe a non-academic way to think about it is tapping into the power of being human and not thinking that leadership is only about meeting the target on the spreadsheet. That is important, but what's the human element? We've probably all experienced being sick or not happy about something in our personal lives, but a leader took the time to maybe understand what was going on with us. Could have been a 30-second conversation. They showed some appreciation or tried to encourage us, and we have all at once we're energized, right, to go do the rest of our day. That's a small example of leading with your heart. So I would say this: there's a lot of great coaches, free information, YouTube videos out there on developing EQ. And so I would say yes, especially in this day and age where adaptability and change are our constant. Developing our EQ and getting to know ourselves and how we can relate is so invaluable and will serve us and our people well, and our people.
Definitely. That's brilliant. That's really brilliant what you've said there. A couple of things that you said there that I wanted to touch on, and then we've got to go to some comments here because there's some real good ones today. But I really like what you said about understanding the human element, understanding that people are people, and emotional intelligence actually is going to be a topic next year. So it's a really important one. I also like what you said about taking the time. And even if that time is only 10 seconds of noticing and listening with intent, and the action might be just a few words. That can make all the difference to somebody around you, not just in a leadership role, but just to somebody around you. Just very quickly, I just wanted to read this comment by Tim. Could we hear your thoughts on leaders' responsibility for empowering teams and how they should deal with lower than expected outcomes, especially when revenue targets or EBITDA requirements? Maybe I think we just touched on that, and it's such a great point and really valid. Let's just have a look at. I just want to make sure that I haven't missed any. We've got a comment here from Kelly. Leadership is the act of guiding a team or individual to achieve a certain goal through direction and motivation. Active listening will win to boot. Yeah. I mean, I think so. I think we've touched on that about directing and motivating a key.
Harvey, would it be okay if I circled back to Tim's comments? Because there are two other points that I'd love to raise there. So, we talked about the human element, but Tim asked about empowering teams. And Tim, I'm not sure here if you meant empowering them to be able to achieve, those EBITDA targets or the revenue goal. But I will say this, empowerment is similar to trust. We throw that word out a lot, but we don't really know what it means until we don't have it. Right? So what does it feel like not to be empowered? You are scared. You are not willing to take risks that could benefit the company or the franchise because you don't want to make a mistake. You aren't as innovative, right? That is not being empowered. So just a couple quick thoughts for empowering your people. It is people are empowered when they know what goal they're supposed to achieve very clearly, and they know what parameters they have to operate in. So, for example, something very simple, you can say, hey, go out and, we want you to build a relationship with this customer so that they'll be open to a renewal. Okay, well, how much leeway do you have to do that? The more you can be specific about, well, what's my bank account to be able to build this relationship? Are the values of the company clear? And as long as I'm in acting integrity with those values, I don't have to get permission for things that I may or may not do. So empowerment is at an individual level, but leaders have an amazing opportunity to institutionalize empowerment by being clear on the parameters that people have freedom to operate within. So that's one. And very quickly, Tim asked about how should leaders deal when expected outcomes like revenue targets are at risk? So who are they accountable to? And, is it meet the target at all costs? If it means running over people and, let's say, running them into the ground, I would caution this. One, be honest. Not a caution. An approach would be honest. If you think you're at risk for missing targets, share that with people who need to know, not only to maintain communication, but also to get input. How can we solve this problem? And then come up with a plan to address it in a way that honors your values as well as tries to achieve the goal. And I use the word "and" because if you're achieving a goal while compromising your values, you're going to deteriorate the fabric of trust you have with your team and your culture, all of which are necessary to attract and retain the great people that make our businesses and franchises successful.
That's a great point. Absolutely, really, really well said. And what an answer to that question as well. But I think, it's so true about the fact that, if you achieve something no matter what, and forget about your integrity and forget about some of the values you've got, you're not really going to have a very well-rounded sense of success there. And that's not going to be very long-term either.
Great point. Yeah.
And I think what you said about communication, if there's a problem in terms of the figures or whatever it might be, to just communicate that, to have a discussion about it, to listen to whoever's saying that to you, and to understand what difference that might make and how you can help them, improve that, whilst maintaining the integrity of the values of both the company and of you and of that person as well. How you make someone feel as a leader, I think, is so important. If you don't remember anything else about a person, you will remember how they made you feel. So that human condition is so important, and it's very hard to quantify it and to put it into boxes. And in fact, actually, that brought me to, I occasionally write something down. But one of the things I was going to ask you, Sonita, is how do you start to examine a leadership style? When we were talking there about putting things in boxes, is there sort of a rigid format? How do you begin to sort of assess where a leader's at and where they need to get to?
Okay, that is a great question. And there are people who specialize, in leadership styles, which I don't. That said, here is something that can benefit anybody, no matter what your style is, and that is to get to know yourself, right? In terms of understanding how you naturally take action. There are a number of assessments out there that can help you understand your natural tendency to take assessments your natural tendency to act and to lead. And that is a great place to start. So something like the DISC profile or the Colby A, which is more about your natural way of working. And even the Enneagram, which people have varying degrees of fondness for, but it centers in on a person's motivation. That is an excellent place to start, because when you know yourself, you can then understand your tendencies to why you might be more naturally inclined to do certain things, and also why you may vibe more or less with another person. So there's no hard and fast, but the gurus, the so-called gurus out there who do specialize in leadership styles, have said that the old days of command and control, that doesn't function very well anymore, because our world is so changing, and the people that we work with also just have very different expectations and knowledge than they did maybe 50 years ago. So that's one style that won't serve you well if you're very fond of command and control. The rest is knowing yourself and understanding these other priorities, which are, you have accountabilities as a leader, that you need to have a vision and be able to communicate it, and also being willing to engage in difficult conversations. And that's the other tip I'll say. None of us like difficult conversations, I believe. Maybe there's the rare one or two, but it is absolutely essential for succeeding in a franchise or any other business to learn how to lean into conflict, confrontation even, and difficult conversations, so you can effectively navigate them, because it is out there. And one of the biggest mistakes I have seen in more than 20 years of working with leaders in the corporate world and in entrepreneurship is just burying the problems. Out of that grows resentment, passive aggressive behaviors, and sometimes even worse, bad behavior multiplies almost like a cancer under the skin, but it shows up in culture, and it turns away people who would otherwise join you because they can see dysfunction happening. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that's some really great problems. I think one of the things that you said there about knowing yourself, I think, was something that I picked up on that I thought was really valid. Because if you know yourself, what you're good at, what you're not good at, you know how to sort of fill in those gaps, as it were, and then you can become a better leader if you know where. Being a leader is not about doing everything brilliantly. It's about inspiring people who are passionate about the things that they do to enjoy and get the most of what they do, and to support them. That's really, for me, what being a leader is about. I think you're right about having difficult conversations and burying problems. My goodness. Yeah. And I think that can happen when leaders think that they do have to be this all-encompassing sort of good at everything type of person, and they don't have to be. And by admitting a problem or admitting a weakness or a difficulty or a challenge is a real true leader there. Just quickly, I just want to recognize a few people because we've been chatting away and there's been some great comments. Dr. Constance saying, I don't think you'll see, we certainly are. And it's fantastic to have you here as well. So, what are the most important skills for a leader to have? Well, I think we've covered out that as well. You know, I think knowing yourself, being honest, listening, you know, you've got two of these and you've got one of these. Remember to use them in that order, I think is that one.
Harvey, may I interject briefly on that one?
Please do, yeah.
I think it's not a skill, but one thing that separates leaders from others, in addition to what we talked about with the vision and the difficult conversations, is the willingness to be accountable, to commit and take ownership for decisions and not to pass the buck. That is a critical thing for a leader. It doesn't mean there may not be other people who contribute, but leaders who declare that this is what we commit to, and they are the ones who say it is ultimately my responsibility, whether or not we did or didn't do that, that is essential for many of the reasons we talked about in terms of the trust, in terms of the accountability for producing results, etc.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that's a very, very important, because also when you're listening to someone who is leading a group of people that you're in, and you hear them take accountability, you know, they're taking some of the pressure away from you, you know, and that's part of what they've got to do. They're taking some of that, you know, they are very accountable, and they're accountable because that allows other people to be free of those difficult things. And that's why, you know, to have that as a skill, to be accountable and to be able to still thrive as a leader whilst being accountable for sometimes some difficult conversations, as you've said, or some very difficult situations. I think it's really, really important. So great question there, Shaisa. So we have Hayek here. Hayek's going to be potentially on the show, and he's involved in franchising. So great to have you here. Well, we have Sia here. So it's great to see you, Sia. My voice is going. Apologies, I had COVID, so my voice is now starting to go. So apologies if I'm going to go all squeaky by the end of this. So what Simon said here, leadership skills in a franchise network, are they different from those you see in a non-franchise company? I think that's a really, really interesting question. My thoughts on it is leadership has got similarities in any environment to be a leader. You know, it's about nurturing, it's about inspiring, it's about listening, it's about being accountable. And those things apply in, you know, in any business. You know, franchising is a way of scaling a business. And there are some other levels of leadership within a franchising model, I think. You know, because you have the franchisor and the franchisee, and you have employees of all of that, and that has a more complex process, perhaps, of working together. But I think the principles of leadership remain true within franchising and within businesses that don't use franchising as a growth model. What do you think about that one?
Yes, so you are the franchise expert. Just to be very, very candid about that, that is not my area, but
you can take the non-franchise bit.
Yeah, well, I would offer two thoughts. If we go back to, you know, a rough rubric for what builds trust, character and competence, I would say that perhaps in a franchise model, the competence piece is a bit different because there are unique dynamics and unique things one needs to understand about what makes for a successful franchise experience that somebody in a different style of business may not know. So that you may need to develop certain competencies that are different in the franchise network. And then the other thing I would just offer, which is a can factor across any business, but maybe particularly applicable to franchising, is understanding that, as a leader, you may also need to manage. Well, what's the difference? Some people say managing is about getting the work done, and leading is more about people. It's just the call to understand what is it that we need to manage in terms of systems and processes and how all those things work together, to the degree that there may be more or less of that in a franchise network. So I'm curious as to your take on that, given, all your years working.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting what you said, especially a couple of things, managing versus leading as well. I think that's a really interesting point. And I think actually in franchising, you get the opportunity to be able to lead rather than manage more than in entrepreneurialism. Because when you're trying to grow your own business from scratch without the benefit of a model that's already been tried and tested, you have to be really in that business, and you have to be trying to really get the mechanics of that business working. Whereas if you take on a business and a franchise that is already tried and tested, and all of those models are already in place, you really do have this unique opportunity to concentrate on leadership rather than management. So I think that's perhaps you've really highlighted a good difference between the two. It's easier to be working on your business than in your business when it's a franchising model. So I think you've really touched on something that I think highlights the difference between the two models. The trust journey as well. I really think it is a trust journey. But I think that applies to any leadership or any relationship as well. When you're growing a relationship between a franchisee and a franchisor, that's a trust journey. When you're looking at hiring a new employee, that's a trust journey between both parties as well. And but I think that's true of any business. Let's have a quick look at if we've got any comments that we've missed here. Sia's just saying hello there, which is great. And we've got Raquel as well. Great to see you. Tim is just thanking you for answering his question so well, which I think was brilliant. And we've got Ned. Oh, it's great to see Ned. I've known Ned from Franchise Chat, which is Joe Caruso's show on Friday. And it's one that you should definitely check out. Really informative, really interesting, and complements this one well. Great point. Feedback should be direct, timely, and appropriate, whether it's performance-based or developmental. Yeah, completely. A leader is directing. A bit like when you've got an orchestra, and so when things aren't going quite right, when you've got to sort of nudge someone down the right path, you've got to be direct. You've really got to be concise about what it is you're saying, what you're needing to achieve by that, and really listen to what it is they're saying. You may not be able to solve the particular problem that they're bringing to you, but what you do need to do is to be able to listen, make sure they understand that you've listened, and what the plan of action might be for that challenge. Even if the plan of action is, look, at the moment we can't do something about this, or it's not something that can be done now. Timely as well, appropriate. These are great words. You can be truthful. You can be you can say things that need to be said, but you can say them at the appropriate time. And you can, I think that's key. Someone said to me that you should celebrate in public and criticize in private. And I think that's an interesting thing for a leader to hear. If someone does something really well, it's fine for that to be overheard. But if someone needs some help and it's a challenging situation, that's a time more for a private conversation. But, some great points there.
Really good.
We've got a few others here. So what's Kelly said here? I've also found that you find the true core of a leader when you see how they handle or manage a crisis. Yeah. What do
Mhm.
you think about that one, Sonita? Do you think that
Oh,
things go wrong, that's where you see a true leadership, or can it come from a more positive place?
oh, well, both. But I think if we look at our own lives, how do we react when things don't go well? And I want to publicly celebrate Harvey here with all the LinkedIn challenges that weren't going right. He told me, he goes, I had an exhilarating morning. Some people say, well, that just was terrible. And I'm so glad he just said it was exhilarating. That shows a little bit of something about Harvey, right? That he chooses to embrace the energy and the positivity when things don't go out. So absolutely, when there's a
Always look on the bright side of life.
how it'll things are revealed. I'll use one very famous example. It was from the 1980s when Johnson and Johnson, the large pharmaceutical company, had unfortunately a string of deaths associated with their product. I believe it was Tylenol, because of something that happened in manufacturing the bottles. And rather than hide from it, they owned up to it, in part because they operate under what they call I believe it's their credo, which is a statement of their values that said they were not only going to, what they do has to be good for shareholders and customers and society. You can go look it up online. It's quite brilliant. But how they handled that crisis, which cost them a lot of money because they paid out to the victims' families and did a host of other things, it wound up eventually shooting up their stock price because they showed who they were and that they actually lived up to those standards, that they weren't just, values on a wall in a break room. They actually were principles that governed how they operated. So I truly do believe this reveals true leadership.
Yeah, I think I do. And I think it's probably a bit of human nature, because as human beings, we are designed to react to things that may be a threat to us. And we're designed to overcome those things that are more challenging than other things. So I think you're right. I think it's a really, really good point that Kelly's made. That's okay. That brings us back to the topic of today, actually. That it's leadership mistakes, and whether it's challenges or whether it's mistakes or other things that perhaps you could have a negative side to. It's how you handle them that really makes you shine. Yeah, I think it's a great point. So
Yeah,
embrace those challenges and those mistakes, and show people what leader you are.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I would also offer the thought that there are avoidable mistakes that we can we can seek to avoid. If anybody's interested, and if you'd allow me when we're all done, there's a free guide I have on some of those mistakes. I call them 5 mistakes of poor leadership and how to avoid them, because they cost money, right? They cost relationships, they cost the ability to attract. So if that's okay with you, Harvey, I'd love to just drop that
Absolutely.
link after. If not, that's no problem.
No,
People
no,
can
no. That's absolutely fine with me, and very generous of you. It's, I just want people to get value from these conversations, and that is a really
great,
valuable thing to be able to offer. So, no,
great.
absolutely, and that kind of brings me on to please check out Sonita's profile, look at what she can do in terms of people first leadership. Please definitely share that, connect, and continue those conversations. We are kind of starting to come towards the end, although we may go on a little longer today because I was messing about at the beginning, pushing buttons, trying to make LinkedIn work, but just put a few other things up here. So we go back to trust and communication. Laura says, yes, we do. Yeah. And it's always worth putting these things back on because they're worth repeating, because they're so important. There's 2 words there that if you wanted to write down 2 words as a leader and you wrote down those 2 and you lived by those, you would do. My doorbell is going to ring any second just to prove it's live. Ready? And there it goes. So we have a plan for this. I knew this was going to happen. So It's all okay. What have we got here that Simon says? Doesn't command and control work in franchising, though? It's an interesting point.
It is.
A really interesting point, actually, because we've done, in fact, Mara, when she was on, we did franchise mindset, and we're doing that again in the new year, because the mindset of a franchisee is a unique one, because you have to be an entrepreneur, but you also have to be able to represent a brand and to follow brand standards and guidelines. But it's your business. And really what you're doing in franchising is you're saving a huge amount of time. As I said before, you're being allowed to work on your business rather than work in your business. And if you would come up with all these systems on your own, it might take you 2 years, might take you 10 years, and you would have made lots of mistakes along the way. What's your thoughts on that?
Yes. So if I'm recalling this correctly, this harks back to about 30 minutes ago when we were talking about different styles. And I said, the one thing that doesn't work anymore is command and control for leadership. So what I'm understanding from you, Harvey, though, is franchising has a model, a framework that by design has very specific instructions, but also latitude for freedom within certain parameters, right? So from that standpoint, I view that more as the structure of the business. But when you're talking about leading people, even if you say, let's say Domino's, the pizza chain, I know we have it in the US. I'm not sure if it's over across the pond, right? But I imagine they've got a hiring guide, right? And a good way. But once you attract those people, you're still leading them. Somebody who has been a great employee starts coming to work late. Command and control style would say, look, you do that one more time and you're gone. Versus what we're talking about, which is using EQ and pairing empathy with accountability, sitting down with the person to understand what's going on. You haven't behaved like yourself. Like, we got to work through this because when you're not here on time, these things happen, but tell me what's going on. Let's see if we can do something. That would be my interpretation of the difference, having a command and control style, maybe framework versus command and control style leadership when it comes to your people.
Yeah, I think you've absolutely nailed it there. I think that's exactly right. And I think what you said there about trying to understand if there's a problem with an employee, if there's a problem with a franchisee, it's that accountability again, isn't it? It's being accountable isn't just being accountable for things that go wrong within the business that perhaps are your responsibility. It's being accountable for the business as a whole, even things completely outside of your control, even things that are happening in other people's lives. You're still accountable. So I love there about, trying to understand what's going on in that situation, and really listening and being accountable for even a challenge that is perhaps some people might say somebody else's, but it's not. And that's what's being a great leader is about, that accountability. So I think that's a great point to raise, and interesting to touch on that. Now, this is a good one. I believe that the franchisor and the franchisee are both leaders. They simply do not lead the same people. Yes, I think that's true enough to a degree, because you've got a structure within most franchised businesses where you have the master franchisee or the business owner of some sort, and then you have franchisees kind of reporting up. And then those franchisees are going to have their own team to support and lead. Mm-hmm. But I think a good franchise business, you're all working within the same organization with the same values and hopefully the same leadership values and styles. because that's what should be taught at all levels. So I think that's very true. I think that, you know, you've got leaders within all parts of the franchisee and franchisor business, leading hopefully in the same way, but yes, maybe not the same people, but certainly using the same core values and the same good leadership styles. We are drawing to an end, but I just want to recognize a couple more people before we conclude things today. So Olu is here. Olu's a good friend of mine. Nice for Olu to be here. He's put here, I guess I'm really beginning to see maybe why I'm not a millionaire yet. My time management is just so poor. Yeah, now that's an interesting point, actually. How do you approach time management? You've done a few things on this, I know, Sonita, and what's your sort of take on, I know we're getting towards the end, but brief take on time management.
So I learned this from one of my mentors who is a multimillionaire, and he said most people say that time is money. It is not. It is more precious than money, because with your time, you can create something that could make you money many times over. You could solve a critical problem that prevents the loss of millions of dollars. So I would say this: learn to value your time more than you learn to value money, and focus more on prioritization of where your time and your energy are going, rather than trying to manage minutes and hours.
That was beautifully said. And I think I couldn't agree with you more as well. You know, time is so valuable, and what you do with it. And I think understanding that it's more valuable than money is a really important thing to do, especially for an entrepreneur as well. You know, the money side of things come, you know, if you get all of the other values and all of the other things right, you know, the money will come after that. Hello. So yeah, I think that's really, really important, and a really, really important point to raise. And thanks for answering that so concisely as well. I think we are drawing towards an end today. I think we've recognized everybody that has been here today. So just to conclude, thank you for everyone that's in the audience today. Been some amazing comments. You know, I talk often about the fact that on these LinkedIn Lives, which are part of all sorts of different things on the show, but it's really the audience that drive the show. You know, I talk about it, and today was an amazing example of that. You know, a real true example. So I've really, really enjoyed the conversation today, despite the slightly shaky beginning to it. It was an amazing conversation. And I wanted to say to you, Sonita, thank you so much for your time and for you know, the amazing advice and conversation that we've had today. Have you got any final thoughts before we conclude things?
No, I just wanted to say thank you to you and your incredible audience, because conversation is what connects and what advances. And so perhaps a parting thought is, as leaders, let's seek to have more conversations like this with fellow leaders, with people we can learn from, and with the people we're trying to lead.
Sounds a perfect way to end. Well, look, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sonita. We will be here the same time next week, 5:15 p.m. GMT and 12:15 p.m. EST. So with that, thank you, everyone. See you next week, and take good care.